Well, hello and welcome to the Sky Sports F1 podcast, where two become one this week, not three. Damon Hill, 1996 Formula One world champion, and myself, David Croft, talking through all things from the weekend, and sadly not in the company of TV's Matt Baker, who can't be with us today because he was at Glastonbury over the weekend, and he is feeling really, really rough today. I mean, to be honest, Damon, he's not feeling well, bless his heart. Nothing to do with standing in a field watching Dua Lipa, but everything to do with the fact that he's just gone down with something today.
Well, David, if you want to pick up a bug, I would say going to Glastonbury for the weekend is probably a good way of doing it. So poor old Matt, get well soon.
But I'm going to use the Glastonbury segue for our first talking point today because two things have set the world of social media alight. Glastonbury being one of them, and the amount of flags that were blocking the view of people's action and trying to see the stage. And Max Verstappen and Lando Norris in Austria. So I'll tell you what, we'll put the flags to one side for a moment and we'll talk Max and Lando. How did you see that at the weekend?
Oh my God, it is like stepping into a bonfire, isn't it? Of kind of very angry people and very pro one side or the other people. So we know it's controversial. We know it's going to excite criticism and contradiction and stuff. But that's good because that's all what we want in Formula One, isn't it?
Exactly. Everyone is entitled to an opinion. What's your opinion? It was a race that was bubbling up nicely, and then it just boiled over. So in terms of the three incidents that I think most people are talking about, including the final incident where they took each other out of contention for the race win, and Max picked up a penalty. Lando got a penalty for the second incident for exceeding track limits. How did you see the driving standards?
Well, I think first thing I want to say is that it lent itself very well, I thought, to racing. Actually, the Red Bull Ring there, both in the sprints, we saw lots of action, and the gravel traps runoff, of course, was interesting in that you saw drivers going to the limit. You could actually tell when they were on the limit because you saw loads of gravel flying everywhere. But there was lots. It was building up. The tension built up beautifully, and I think we were a little bit robbed of a fantastic climax to the race, and we'll never know what the outcome would have been. I mean, it looked to me like Lando had the pace, and that's why Max had to do his, I'm going to call it fiendish defending. I'm sorry, because I think that Max has got a reputation of not willingly giving up the lead without a massive fight. And okay, if you know that about Max, then you have to approach him with a great deal of caution. But we have got these rules about how you go about racing. Now, the question is, did he break those rules? Or did Lando get a little bit too defensive in his rights as a racing driver to stand his ground? Because I think there was an element of when he put his car in the position of the outside, he could have gone onto the curb, but he decided, no, I'm not moving. He's not supposed to change line, and he's supposed to give me enough room. And the collision happened. It was sort of inevitable. It was sort of coming for a few laps.
Yeah. I've made some notes here. For the first time in my life, Damon, I've actually written some notes down for this podcast. Once upon a time, you got some notes too. Look at this. There's these notes here. Once upon a time, there was a rule, and we called it the Max Verstappen rule, where anybody moving in the braking zone would be instantly investigated. Now, that came in for about a year after... Well, it was after situations like Hungary, 2016, if you remember. Kimi Raikkonen tried to pass Max on the inside, and Max moved right and then moved left, and Kimi damaged his front wing. And then Belgium with Kimi Raikkonen again on the Kemmel Straight, where he had to back off and put the brakes on. Otherwise, there would have been quite a big crash there. So the rule was brought in, but that rule was then dropped. And what we're talking about now is Sporting Code Chapter 4, Appendix L of the Code of Driving Conduct on Circuits. You'll know this one very well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I read it all the time before I go to bed.
Some would say helps you sleep. Others would say that every driver should know this. If a driver moves erratically or goes unnecessarily slowly or behaves in a manner that could endanger another driver, then they will be investigated. Previously, it was anyone moving under braking will be investigated. So
it's no longer under braking, you're saying?
No. No, so
it's not the braking thing is we can forget that that's not part of the code.
No, it's a driver moving erratically or going unnecessarily slowly. It kind of applies to the braking zone, and the way I see it, and the way it was explained to me, and I spoke to one of the stewards yesterday, who was on duty in Austria, that basically if you move in one direction to defend your line, that's absolutely fine, but it's when you then change direction again, and I think for me in Austria, watching it and shouting at the TV as Formula One fans do. And it was really quite nice to shout at the TV for a change because it was getting that exciting. Max continually moves and then moves again. And he's moving again where the contact is made round about, inside that 100 metres after the brakes have been applied into turn 3. And whilst you say, Lando knows he's putting his car in a risky position, surely if he knows the rules and the rules are being applied properly, he's entitled to a car's width and he's entitled to room and he's entitled for a driver not to move to the left and squeeze him.
And then there's another obligation, which is the driver that's being overtaken. If he knows a car's there, he's supposed to give a full car width. And if you're talking about track limits, Lando is under how many? Had 3 or 4 track limit violations. He was black and white flag.
Well, for the second incident, he got a 5-second penalty, didn't he?
So if he actually took avoiding action, he would then have violated track limits again. So he kind of couldn't move over left, could he? In some ways,
he couldn't go completely off the track. No, that's very true. When I say second incident, I mean the second incident with Max when he went down the inside that time. But to me, you've been a steward before, haven't you?
I was a steward for a brief occasion. I think I did one at Monaco, maybe another one somewhere else. I can't remember. But
what I don't understand watching it is why the stewards, after incident 1, where Max clearly moves and changes direction at turn 3, why the stewards didn't say there and then, or race control, say there and then.
It's a good point.
Because it's not the stewards, it's race control that do the noting and then pass on to the
race
stewards.
Control send it down to the stewards, and then the stewards have to investigate what the race control say.
But why wasn't it said, right, that's against the rules, here's a black and white flag, don't do that again? Because then at least both drivers know where they stand here.
Yeah, but this was unfolding in a very short space of time as well. So they have to, once it's been reported, then it has to get out to the stewards, then they have to be able to review it. And let's say that could take a lap or so. And it was all unfolding. And there was another incident they had to review almost immediately afterwards, I would expect. So it must have been pretty hot in the steward's room there, trying to go through all these things. But it is the point of having the driver steward in the room, which is one of the stewards will be an ex-racing driver, probably a Formula One driver. And the reason they have them there is to help the stewards who previously were people who were FIA legal guys, they were good with regulations and stuff, but they hadn't actually got that much experience of being out on the track. So the driver was supposed to give advice to them as to what to do. But what they then did was they made the driver steward an actual steward. So the steward, he's now a full steward. So but that means that you've got one of the guys there has been on the track and he's supposed to call the shots, I suppose, with regard to guiding the stewards as to whether it's a violation of the regulations or not. And then they have to look at the regulation. Then they have to make sure that they're applying it the right way. All that takes time. And so, but you're absolutely right. If it was, let's say it was a foul on a football field, the ref blows his whistle, right?
Yes.
We're not going to stop the match, but the point is, or stop the race. But the point is, I think valid, you're absolutely right. If somebody is quick enough, they should be able to say, that's not right. You've been given a warning. Okay, so almost immediately someone should be able to say, as they see it happen, we know that's wrong. You have been given a warning. And that can go directly down to the pit wall and then to the driver.
It's not the first time that we've been talking about Max Verstappen in this way, and he got a 10-second penalty for it. I don't know if 10 seconds was enough. I think in terms of the guidelines the stewards worked to, I can understand why they gave that 10 seconds. In the end, it had little or no bearing on his result after he came in to change tyres. Lando, of course, lost out and retired from the race after serving his 5-second penalty for the track limit violation. I'm not going to lead the calls for Max to get a grid penalty for the next race, but was a 10-second penalty enough, considering that his move resulted in one driver retiring and him costing his own chance of a win?
Well, I don't know what the rules are regarding penalties as they can be applied. It might be that they can only apply a 10-second penalty, but there again, I think the FIA, who govern the race, and the way that the race is run, they should be able to apply a penalty if they think that something is, unsporting or bad driving, and they want to reprimand it and they want to stop it. And then this is the rot question that we have to. It was brought up by Andrea Stella and also Martin during the race commentary, where he said the thing is, if you don't do anything about it when it happens, it will happen again. Now, the question is, how far do we go back, in recent racing history, to start to address the point of things not being done when they should have been done? You could go back to 1989 with or 1988, was it? Or 1990 with Senna and Prost in Suzuka.
Yeah.
Then you've got, of course, if you want to go back even further, you've got the famous race between Arnoux and Villeneuve at Dijon, where you had wheel banging going on, but they were loving it and everyone was loving it, and there was no complaint afterwards, and nothing bad happened. And they were all smiles. It wasn't even for the race lead, I don't think, was it? It was second place.
No, it was great racing, but neither of them, took each other out and caused punctures, etc.
Only by luck, really. But we obviously look at that and think that was fantastic fun. That was great. But the problem is, at some point someone oversteps the mark, and I think that the tragedy of this is that when you have a driver, and I think Andreas Stella also alluded to this, when you have a driver that's brilliantly talented, he's a nice guy. Max is a nice guy. Let's get this absolutely clear. This is not a British fans versus Dutch fans thing at all, because we're British and we're accused of being biased. And this is an opinion that I'm going to express based on the fact that I love this sport. It's given me so much, and I want to see it performed. I want to see it played out in a sporting way, hard but fair, But I think the trouble is, when you've got someone like Max who's come up by winning, being ruthless, which he clearly is. He is very, very. Everyone knows if you go for a pass on Max for a race win, he's going to try and biff you. It's just going to happen. Now, the question is, how much damage is that doing to his long-term reputation as a driver? When you've got the potential.
I don't think Max cares about that. I don't think he cares about reputation.
I think that's the point. Is he doesn't care now because it works. Because on balance, he'll come out on top, and that is a lot of the calculation that goes into some teams and drivers' approach to motor racing, is that there is a calculation that on balance, I'll lose some, but I'll win some. I'll win more than I'll lose. Yeah. And the evidence is that they're right, because nothing's done. So nothing firm is done to prevent them. So they'll carry on doing it. So I think that's where we're at now, is great driver, potentially going to go down in history as a little bit too feisty when it comes to defending. And I would hate for that to happen, because I would love to see great drivers have an impeccable reputation. You can go back, and I'm going to sound very boring, but drivers of the past didn't get into that sort of thing. Maybe it's because it was more dangerous, and if you wheel banged with people, then the consequences were dire. So you can say that Fangio or Stewart or Lauda, Prost maybe didn't do that sort of thing. And then along comes Ayrton, much more aggressive, and he was the person who was approached or he was challenged by Jackie Stewart as being too involved in accidents and having had more accidents than. And there was that famous interview where he calls him Stewart. He says, "You should know Stewart, you know more." And of course, that's the issue at stake. I think here we're seeing in the long line of great drivers. It's not down to the drivers. It's not down to the teams. It's down to the FIA to do something about it. It's down to the people who referee the sport to make sure they're firm enough. And I think that they're, for some reason, that's where it started to slide.
So I did take this up with the steward that I was talking to, and I did say Andrea Stella had a point. You know, historically, you didn't punish at the time, and Max has been allowed to drive the way he drives, and he's driven like that ever since he came into the sport. And that particular steward then reminded me of certain penalties that they did give Max for misdemeanors on the track, and then I quoted Brazil Turn 4 in 2021, and we agreed to end the conversation there because that was a clear case, I think, of forcing another driver off the road that was never penalised.
You're right to bring that up, actually, David, because that's where it slid, and it slid all the way into Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
It basically, they were playing fast and loose with regulations. They've been criticised for over-regulating. And of course, the people who would stand to gain most will object most strongly against any regulation and restriction on their ability to fight on the track. And of course, that's what you ended up with, is you ended up with a kind of loose application of regulations, and we ended up with a mess. Anyway, a lot of dissatisfaction from that. But you asked me the penalty. Just ask me again.
Yeah, well, so I've got the guidelines here that the stewards are given and that they work to. So the breach of driving erratically or in a manner which could be deemed potentially dangerous, etc.
I used to drive erratically all the time. I was trying to drive non-erratically, but it was just the way I drove.
You used to blame that on a lack of downforce. A 10-second penalty is the baseline penalty, but the stewards could have given a drive-through or a 10-second stop or go, or had Max not finished the race, a grid penalty for the next race. So they were the penalties that were available to the stewards. So they went for the baseline rather than look for anything more severe. I assume, and I've not spoken to any of the four stewards in Austria as yet, I assume because they felt Max had gone from second down to fifth, and that was punishment enough. The relationship between Lando and Max, how does that move on from what happened there? And was there ever a driver that you were particularly close to and as a friend while you were driving that you had a disagreement with on track? And how did you repair the relationship going forward as a result of that?
Well, there's two ways to answer this. One is I never had any friends when I was racing that I raced
against. Which is probably the better way of doing it, to be fair.
I mean, I think that I would be appalled if I feel very bad if I've done something bad. I just am. So, and there have been occasions when I made a complete balls up, and everyone will know about those. And there are other times when I was the victim of someone's bad driving, and we just move on. If it was, but the question is, was there any malice? Was there any intent to nobble the opponent? And that's where it gets into the area of bad feeling, because if you feel like somebody is not going to, I think Lando's point was, if he says sorry, then maybe we can move on. But if he's unapologetic, and also worse than that, if he doesn't recognize that driving like that is out of order, then you've got a continual problem. And so how do you rectify that? If that is, then you get into debate about what we're here to do, because Max has often said, I'm here to race. I don't care. That's the way I race. And so it's unlikely that he's going to change that attitude. It's worked. I mean, I was going to mention, as far as penalties goes, do you remember that Michael Schumacher disobeyed the black flag and then he got banned for a couple of races? I think that's right. What the penalty was. So, he disobeyed the black flag and then he got banned for the next race. So I think sometimes the penalty needs to apply to races in the future rather than the current race, because quite often we end up with that long-winded debate over how what the result will be 2 hours after the end of the race.
I don't think Max deserved a black flag for what happened in Austria.
No, I'm not suggesting
I think
that. I'm not suggesting
would be far too inappropriate.
I'm just giving an example of penalties that have applied, have been, so they have actually banned drivers from racing in the future if they were that badly behaved. So that's an option. And I don't know if they've got the penalty point system, but I don't know you start from you get 10 grid place penalty if you get all the points or something.
You get if you get 12. Ask Kevin Magnussen how difficult it is to get 12. He's been on 10 for quite a while now, and they seem to be quite lenient with him. And I'm not trying to have a go at Kevin Magnussen for this, but there've been a couple of incidents that you think, actually, if you were only on 6, you'd have got a couple of penalty points for that. What I think I'd like to see happen, Damon, I'd like to see Christian Horner, Jonathan Wheatley, and GP Giampiero Lambiase just called in for a chat with the stewards when they get to Silverstone. Because one thing I did listening and watching, I did feel was the way that the Red Bull team, obviously protecting their driver, because any team would do that, kind of made it out that it was all Lando's fault and that Max had been sinned against. When I don't think that was the case. You could argue Lando shouldn't have had his car there, but Max definitely moved twice in those braking zones and was causing the issue as far as I saw it. But I'd just like a chat that says to the Red Bull team, look, we know you're trying to protect your driver, but you're not doing him any favours. Because if you keep saying this is allowed, this is tolerated, this is absolutely fine, he's going to keep doing it. And if he keeps doing it, eventually it's going to cost him way more than cost him on Sunday. So you can either have an honest chat with him or you can carry on mollycoddling. It's entirely up to you. Yeah,
I agree. I think there is too much rounding. And maybe privately behind closed doors, they say to Mac, oh, that's too much. Mate, you've gone too far there. And we could have won that race, but you had to get entangle with the other guy. And of course, the risk is that you don't finish. So maybe they do that privately, but publicly they put up a very strong protective ring around Max. But I mean, some of the times when you hear Max on the radio to Giampiero, it's anybody. If anyone talked to me like that, I'd have a few things to say about him. He can be a little bit rude, is what I would describe it as. And I understand he's under stress, but I don't think. See, I don't want to blame Max. I think Max is one of these incredible talents who've necessarily been given opportunities because he needs to have the opportunities for his talent. And maybe somebody in that fraternity needs to say, listen, there is a question of conduct, there is a question of attitude and respect for others, which is important in sport. And there's no money attached to it and there's no points for it, but there's a lot of other benefits to behaving that way, I think.
And Martin alluded to this in his column on the Sky Sports website, which is well worth a read if no one's read it yet or someone hasn't read it yet.
I think I posted half of it on my Instagram, actually, because I agree with what he's saying.
Everyone's probably read it. But do you think there is merit to Max's kind of is stuck in the middle of an argument of which he probably has a bit of control, but seemingly has no control at the moment, and that's behind the scenes at Red Bull, and this almost tug of war on him, where it seems his dad has a view and wants to take him one way, and his manager probably has a view that wants to take him in a way that might be different, but in a way that gets him the most money, because that's what managers do, and they're very good at it. And his team want to take him in a direction that stays with them, and Helmut Marko might want to take him in a completely other direction. And he's kind of stuck in the middle of people who've had a great influence on his life. Father, manager, Helmut Marko, the man who brought him into the Red Bull fold, and Christian Horner as his boss at the team. And they've all got a different outcome for him, it seems. Now, that must take its toll eventually.
I think possibly, yes. I mean, you don't want to get too much into personal life, but you're talking really about the management structure, and the management structure includes people that are very close to him and have been very close to him for a very long time, and he's very indebted to. Let's be honest, Red Bull have picked him up; they've given him all the opportunities. His dad's done all the legwork, but we saw something similar with Lewis, didn't we? And his dad, Anthony. There comes a point where the child becomes a man and wants to look after his own destiny, and the question is whether or not that's possible for Max where he is right now. And it's a really hard area, time of life to be in, to actually take control of your own career. It's a big job to take control of a career as big as his, and his personality and his value to the sport. So yeah, you need someone you can trust. And of course, the people you worked with all your life are going to be the people you most trust. I mean, I was going to ask this question. I wanted it to be asked, is given, let's say there's talk about him going to Mercedes, what would Toto's view be with regard to how Max drives? Because that might be an interesting clash of opinions. Yeah. I mean, I tend to believe that Toto believes that he wants his drivers to race fair, hard and fair. Now, if he wants Max to drive for Mercedes, is he going to be as tolerant as Red Bull are of the way Max drives? Well,
Toto, I think, rather dodged the question straight after the race, and said he hadn't seen it. To be honest, it was they get the best views. Football managers, team principals, they get all the views they want, and somehow they never see it quite at the time. I suppose look, Mercedes had a code of conduct, didn't they, and driving standards when Nico and Lewis were getting too close for comfort in 2016, and they have rules by which they expect their drivers to behave with each other. Whether that extends to other drivers on the track, I don't know. But Toto's a racer. Christian Horner, is a racer himself. They'll be able to empathise, I'm sure, with the situation Max is in. But at the end of the day, they're also responsible for a large organisation, the team, and you do what's best for the team at all times. I suppose you could argue, Damon, that Max extended his championship lead and absolutely did the right thing for Constructors and Drivers' Championship, because Red Bull came out of it with a bigger lead and Max came out of it with a bigger lead. So he didn't do anything wrong by the team, did he?
Yeah, but this is a team that has suffered at the hands of the tactics and the approach that Max and Red Bull take. I mean, they're very, very good. And I'm not being, I don't want it to turn into a negative thing about. I recognise their brilliance. I recognise the team that they've built up and the teamwork on the pit wall and stuff, and the driving talent at Red Bull. It's astonishing, and it is also at Mercedes. But let's be honest, there's a different culture. The two of them have a different culture, and I think that was highlighted a little bit when, of course, the peak of it, I suppose, or pre-peak of it, was at Silverstone when Max and Lewis collided. And one blamed the other, and there was all sorts of accusations. Well, actually, really what should have happened, I feel, on that Silverstone event, and interestingly, it came after a sprint race again. Yeah. So Austria was a sprint race. So you had the race the previous day. Everyone kind of learns about where everyone's strengths and weaknesses are. And then you go into the main race and you know the score, what will happen if one guy gets past you. And it seems to raise the temperature, I think, of the second race, I would call it, or the main Grand Prix. And that's what happened going into the first few laps of Silverstone, where it was way over the top. It was boiling over. Both drivers were very, very aggressive, and a very serious accident happened. And that's, again, I would say, where the FIA, if I had had the power then, and I was an FIA steward, I would have said, right, you guys, stop it. Someone's going to get hurt. Start from the back of the grid for the next Grand Prix. Because I honestly felt that strongly about the way they were racing. It was way over the top. It wasn't clever, and something. It was always going to end in tears. And that's. But the point of going back to my point is that Toto objected to the aggressiveness of Max, but you could equally argue that Lewis raised rose to the bait. And I think also Lando rose to the bait a little bit. And this is what happens next, is when you've
because
got a
of the
driver
sprint
who's not
race
great.
the day before.
Yeah,
because
possibly.
he tried and failed on that, and then I've
Yeah.
got another opportunity this time around. I'm going to make it stick.
And you're left with no other option but to fight dirty if the other guy's fighting dirty. How do you get past him cleanly? You've got to, and that's what possibly explains Lando's lunge. I call it Lando's lunge. He did a couple of lunges, it was just the only way I'm going to do this is dirtily. I'm going to have to kind of make a messy pass here, just get my car and hope it can stick. But anyway.
So we move on to Silverstone then, and it's highly likely. We had it last year. We might have it again this year, that we've got Max and Lando alongside each other, front row of the grid, battling it out once again. And we'll talk about Silverstone in a couple of moments. Before we move on, though, it was Lando's 115th race in Austria. It was George Russell's 115th race. So we should say well done, George Russell, for getting that victory. There was a moment, I kid you not, I turned to my oldest son and I went, do you know what? I ought to have a bet on George Russell winning this race at the moment. I think we're about 15 laps out from this flag, maybe 20 laps out from the flag. I said, George Russell's got a really good chance of winning this. He went, oh, Dad, he's way off. I went, no, just the way this is shaping up, you've got to be in it to win it. And I'm not sure Lando and Max are going to be in it in terms of a win by the checkered flag. And I really wish, Damon, that I could take you for a beer and pay with my gambling winnings, but I didn't have the bet.
You didn't have the bet.
I didn't have the bet. I really should have done. And look, George Russell, you've got to be in it to win it. He kept at it. He just drove a really solid race. And I'm really pleased for him and for Mercedes, to be fair, because they seem to have turned a corner. Well, many corners, and this time they've not gone down a cul-de-sac. They seem to be finding performance rather than fixing problems on the car. And whilst that performance is not as good, I don't think overall as a Red Bull or a McLaren, it's good to see him up there.
Yeah, and you might say they've done a better job. They've moved themselves well ahead of Ferrari in some ways. They seem to be now the next challenger behind McLaren and Red Bull. So they've got something to play with.
I think on these tracks, yes. Speaking to Fred Vasseur in Spain, he was of the view that Canada, Spain, Austria, Silverstone wouldn't necessarily be great for Ferrari, but they'll come back after that. I tell you what I do think at the moment, that we're seeing upgrades being brought to the track in different phases. Back in your day, you'd start the season with a package, you'd get to the first European race, there'd be a big upgrade, everyone would have it, and then there'd be another couple of upgrades, big upgrades, between then and the end of the year. And everyone brought upgrades at pretty much the same time. Now, we're seeing upgrades coming to the track at different stages, a bit like an offset tyre strategy. So if you're 3 or 4 races behind someone's upgrade package, you are going to suffer as a result of that until your next upgrade comes and moves you back ahead again, unless you're Red Bull, who seem to be kind of staying out in front. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm just wondering also how much of these upgrades have to take into account the budget cap and their ability to, and the resetting of the wind tunnel time after the constructors reshuffle, which happens at Silverstone or now?
It's been reset now.
It's reset now. So they will all have different ceilings that they can go to, and they will have to take into account, they don't want to run out of room and be stuck, but at the same time, I don't know. Anyway, must get very complicated trying to work out whether or not you can get people to work, another 10 hours on doing a new front wing or not. But
it's how much wind tunnel time and how much CFD time you get, and then how much money have you got in the budget? And every crash takes away some of that performance and development budget as well. Let's get on to Silverstone. Since George Russell's win, since that the incidents in Austria, since the McLaren revival, and the fact that we've had so many different winners in the last few races, I'm told ticket sales are going brilliantly for Silverstone. They've only got a few hundred tickets left now. The ticket office is very, very busy, which is brilliant because we all want to see Silverstone do well and have a full house.
Bring your space hopper.
Yes, bring your space hoppers. Actually, wouldn't it be great to have a space hopper stand so that when there was a great That would make a fantastic sight.
I don't know what the insurance would be for that, but anyway.
I want to see. Maybe we could do a Guinness World Record for the amount of space hoppers ever raced at Silverstone, ever. Might be one for next year, not this year. What do we got? Kings of Leon Thursday night, Pete Tong Ibiza Classics Saturday night, Rudimental Sunday night, and I forget who's playing on Friday, to be honest. 4 big gigs. 3 big days of non-stop track activity as well. Colapinto, the Argentinian driver, or the Argentine driver who won in F2 in Austria, going to be making his FP1 debut for Williams. Williams have got 1,000 names on the side of their car of all the staff that have gone into to helping make that car. I'm not expecting Williams to be at the sharp end. Who is going to win the British Grand Prix?
Well, I don't know about you, but it's gone. And then the doorbell rang.
And then, my doorbell rang.
I hate this question. It's impossible, actually, but the point is, because some people take it as a preference, who would I like to see win? And I've got to say a British driver. And we've got 3, potentially, who could win the British Grand Prix. But I want to see a great race. And that's not to say that, if Max does a great job and he wins the Grand Prix, then he deserves it. And then we'll be clapping for Max as well. But the race is on. The race is definitely on for the British Grand Prix. We don't know how it's going to pan out. I think Ferrari could be in there as well. I think they're going to be...
You do?
Yeah, I think they could be good on a faster track. They seem to pull things out of the hat at Silverstone.
You've got to keep talking for a minute because my shirt for Saturday has just turned up and you're going to love this. I could wear the Here Comes Sebastian Vettel t-shirt, but I've got another one.
Why is Sebastian Vettel coming? Is he coming to the British Grand Prix? What's he doing?
Well, no, he's not. But once upon a time, I shouted out on telly, "Here comes Sebastian Vettel," and people kind of liked it as a commentary line, so I had a t-shirt made up for it, to be honest. Weather forecast is bad in terms of it's not going to be sunny. Bit of rain around as well. I just get the feeling that McLaren are on a roll at the moment and have massively taken the fight to Red Bull, and their car excels in high-speed corners. And I can, as much as George and Lewis will have the adulation of the crowd, I think Lando's going to get just as much, and with a bit of a better chance to stand on the top step of the podium. Wouldn't surprise me if it's 2 McLarens and a Red Bull that are there in the top 3 on Sunday afternoon.
I think Oscar's had a lot of bad luck. He drove very well, I thought. Very unlucky to lose his grid position, lose his fastest lap in qualifying. But the evidence was not actually that clear that he'd gone over the line. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He drove well. He did some great overtakes. And I think they could well be, McLaren. One of the McLarens, I think, could win this race. What are you doing? You're putting on a flowery shirt.
Put my shirt on. I'm putting my shirt on, Damon.
Okay.
How about that?
Very smart. Yes.
How about that for?
Is it waterproof?
Saturday? It will be on Saturday. An hour after qualifying finishes, where we'll have a Brit on pole, Lando, George, or Lewis. Don't mind either. We're going to have England in the quarterfinals of the Euros. So I've got from the bad shirt.
Of course it is. I see the pictures a bit blurred. I couldn't see that. They're lions, are they? And
this is like 33 lions on my shirt.
Oh,
That's not a reference to Max Verstappen, by the way. Even though he was car number 33, and he is the Dutch lion, of course.
And now number 1. Yeah.
What do we think? Can we have this for a shirt for Saturday?
Oh, I think you'll get a lot of appreciation for that. Yeah. There we go. I just hope we win.
I get the feeling you don't like it.
And what I don't like is going through the agony of watching England sort of struggle manfully towards victory. It's too painful. But anyway, well done, England. Well done, England.
Right, before we go, breaking news, Damon, from Aston Martin. And this just dropped about an hour ago as we were about to start our podcast. Martin Whitmarsh, after 3 years as Group CEO, is leaving in October to be replaced by Andy Cowell, who people will remember as the MD of Mercedes HPP at Brixworth, the man behind that Mercedes engine in 2014 that so dominated Formula One for many seasons to come after that. His first foray as a CEO of a race team, a group, car company and race team. So he's got a bit to learn about the chassis side and the commercial side. But when it comes to engines, he fully well knows his onions on that. This is big news, and this is Aston Martin getting a man that I think they were on the hunt for about 4 years ago.
No, the performance has slipped, hasn't it? And I think whenever that happens, then the pressure builds and people look for a way out of it, and they need someone to lead them out of it. And so I think they probably found a good guy in Andy Cowley. He's an engineer. They'll respect that. He can look at the mechanics of the whole thing. That's not Martin Whitmarsh's strength. I think he was more financial marketing. What would you describe him as? He's an organisational head, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. I mean, he to be fair to Martin Whitmarsh, he presided over the Honda deal, which I think will be very good for the team, and got that in place, and the building of the new campus. But I just think when it came to results on track, here was a team that started going backwards a bit because, for various reasons on that. And when Fernando Alonso says it's time to stop talking and time to start doing, then you kind of have to take heed with that one as well. And it was quite clear that Fernando and I think Lance as well were just getting a little bit frustrated with upgrade after upgrade coming to a track and it not working.
No,
which is not necessarily the fault of the CEO, but a CEO who was taking quite a keen interest has to take responsibility for that as well. Now, TV's Matt Baker, before he went to lie down in a quiet room because he's not feeling well, which is why it's Damon and I chatting on the podcast this weekend, did give me a handy list, Damon, of when we are on air at the British Grand Prix this weekend. I'm assuming you're with us at the British Grand Prix this weekend.
You assume incorrectly, David. I am not at the British Grand Prix. I'm doing something else though, equally magnanimous. That's the right word. I'm cycling for charity in the south of France in the La Tap for Neuro UK, and you can check all that out on my Instagram and X feeds and stuff. And it's Just Giving. There's a Just Giving page. It's for neurological conditions, and it's sort of sprung out of Sid Watkins's Brain Spine Foundation. It was picked up by Peter Hamlin, and it's basically to create awareness and also revenue to help build this foundation that will help people find a cure for neurological diseases in the UK and hopefully the world.
Excellent stuff. Well, no, and I'm sure it will, Damon. That's absolutely brilliant. How many miles are you cycling?
It's 134 kilometres and it's 4,500 metres of climbing. It's a leg of the Tour de France. It's called the L'Étape du Tour, and it's the amateur. It's the stage that they open up to the amateurs to have a go at. And it's actually very near the end of the Tour de France, that stage. But there's 16,000 cyclists. Last year I started, I think 6,000, and I was overtaken by about 5,000 people, which is the most people I've ever been overtaken by in one day.
Well,
but
quite.
I did get to the end, and I got a medal.
Good man. 83 miles, 134 kilometres. So. Take your Sky Go with you because you might need some motivation while you're pedaling. Friday, 12 p.m, practice 1, 3:45 for practice 2. Saturday, 11:15 for the final practice session, 2:15 for the qualifying build-up, 3 o'clock for qualifying. The race itself, 1:30, the build-up starts on Sunday. The British Grand Prix lights out at 3 o'clock, and we will be on air with our traditional show with the fans on Thursday night as well, which I think is at 6 o'clock, where we'll be live.
I'm going to miss that. I'll try and watch that. Oh God,
when's the actual cycle?
It's actually on Saturday. Well, it was going to be on Sunday, but they called an election, so they've had to change it all, and everyone's hotels and everything. It's chaos. So that they can imagine it's just suddenly they just changed the date of the race to
Hang on a
Saturday
minute. Why don't you join us on the grid on Thursday night, and you can start the cycle ride, and we'll all give you a big cheer and a send-off.
I've got a very early start on Friday morning. I've got to get there and sign on. So yeah,
it's fine.
But I could cycle onto the show. Well, there's a thought. What time? Oh, crikey!
6 o'clock. You can do it. You can do it, Damon.
Well, if I'm there, you'll know if I'm there because I'll make myself abundantly clear.
Damon, we shall miss you if you're not there. We will see everybody else, though, at the British Grand Prix. Can't wait. It is the best week of the year by far. And Silverstone's going to be glorious come rain or shine. Damon, thanks ever so much for having this chat. We will be there at Silverstone. Matt Baker, we hope we'll be there at Silverstone, but after a weekend at Glastonbury, he's had to lie down for the rest of this week, and we wish him well in his speedy recovery. Until next week, take care. See you at Silverstone. Enjoy the British Grand Prix.